The night Sarah decided to tell the truth moved faster than she expected, as if the hours themselves were pushing her toward something she could no longer escape. The house in suburban Ohio felt alive with small sounds, the hum of the refrigerator, the ticking wall clock, Lily's soft laughter drifting from the kitchen, but inside Sarah, everything was racing. She stood near the hallway, watching Michael sit at the dining table with Lily, helping her color a science worksheet for school. Michael leaned close, explaining patiently, his voice calm and warm, the same voice that had once promised Sarah forever. Lily looked up at him with complete trust, her brown eyes bright, her smile easy. That smile cut through Sarah like a quiet knife. She loved her daughter fiercely, and she loved the man at the table too, but between them stood a truth she had buried for years. Sarah remembered the day Lily was born, the panic hidden behind her hospital smile, the way Michael cried when he held the baby, promising to protect her always. Back then, fear had made Sarah silent. Fear of losing love. Fear of raising a child alone. Fear that honesty would destroy everything she hoped to build. Tonight, fear still lived in her chest, but something stronger had joined it, exhaustion. She was tired of lies shaping her days, tired of flinching whenever paperwork asked for family history, tired of the quiet guilt that crept into every happy moment. Michael laughed at something Lily said, and Sarah felt her chest tighten because she knew that laugh might not exist tomorrow. When Lily went upstairs to brush her teeth, Michael turned and smiled at Sarah, asking casually what she wanted for dinner tomorrow, already planning a future that Sarah knew was fragile. She sat across from him instead of standing, because her legs felt weak, and she spoke before she could stop herself, her words fast and shaking but clear enough to change everything. She told him Lily was not biologically his. She did not dress the truth in soft language. She did not add excuses. She just said it, letting the sentence fall where it may. The room seemed to shrink. Michael blinked, as if he had misheard, then asked her to repeat it. Sarah did, her voice cracking but steady enough to carry the weight of years. Michael's face went still, not angry, not loud, but stunned, like someone watching the ground disappear beneath their feet. He asked questions quickly, when, how, why, and Sarah answered just as fast, knowing that pauses might break her. She explained that Lily was conceived before she and Michael were fully committed, during a time of confusion and loneliness, long before marriage, long before promises felt permanent. She explained that the other man had never known, that Michael had been the one who stayed, who showed up, who loved without condition. Michael listened, his jaw tight, his eyes distant, absorbing facts that did not match his memories. He stood up abruptly, pacing once, then stopping near the window. Outside, the neighborhood was quiet, normal, unchanged, which felt unfair. He said he needed air, space, time. His voice was calm, but it no longer reached for her. Sarah followed him halfway, then stopped, realizing this was something she could not chase away. Michael picked up his phone, typed something quickly, and walked out onto the porch without looking back. Sarah sat alone at the table where their family dinners usually happened, her hands folded, her heart pounding, knowing the truth was finally free but that freedom had a cost she could already feel settling into the walls of the house. Michael did not come back inside that night, and when he finally did, it was only to move through the house like a stranger, fast and silent, gathering a few clothes, his laptop, and the framed photo from the living room shelf that showed the three of them at a lake in Michigan, smiling into the sun. Sarah watched from the hallway, her mind racing, her mouth unable to form words that could stop what was happening. Michael did not shout or accuse her, which somehow hurt more than anger would have. He spoke little, his voice flat, asking where his spare keys were, where certain documents were kept, questions that felt like nails sealing a door. Sarah tried to explain again, to say she loved him, that fear had shaped her choices, but Michael raised his hand slightly, not harshly, just enough to signal he could not hear more. He said he needed to protect himself, that trust once broken could not be glued back by tears. Before sunrise, he left the house, and by morning Sarah discovered she had been blocked on every platform, her calls going straight to silence. The shock hit her fully then, sharp and cold, as she sat at the kitchen table staring at her phone, realizing the man who once checked on her during lunch breaks now wanted distance enforced by walls and lawyers. 2 days later, a formal email arrived from a legal office, polite and firm, outlining separation steps and temporary living arrangements, written in language that stripped their years together down to facts and timelines. Sarah read it twice, her hands shaking, feeling as if her marriage had turned into paperwork overnight. She tried to focus on Lily, packing lunches, driving her to school, smiling when teachers waved, but inside she felt hollow. Lily asked where Dad was, and Sarah said he was busy with work, her voice steady while her heart cracked. Meanwhile, Michael moved into a short-term apartment near downtown, sleeping on a couch that smelled like cleaning spray, staring at the ceiling at night, replaying memories he could not sort. He felt betrayed, yes, but also confused by his own pain, because it was Lily's laughter he missed most, not arguments or pride. He avoided places they used to go, took different routes to work, and stopped answering messages from mutual friends. He met with his lawyer quickly, needing control in a situation that had ripped it away from him, signing forms he barely read, driven by the fear that staying open would only hurt more. Yet even as he built walls, moments slipped through. He reached for his phone out of habit when he saw a cartoon ad Lily loved, then remembered he had blocked Sarah, and his chest tightened. Sarah spent nights awake, staring at the empty side of the bed, blaming herself, knowing honesty was right but wishing it had not destroyed everything so fast. The house felt too large now, every room holding echoes of Michael's presence, his shoes by the door gone, his coffee mug missing from the sink. She kept moving because stopping meant drowning in regret. Part 2 of their story unfolded without drama or shouting, just quiet decisions and fast exits, where love did not explode but folded inward, leaving both of them alone with the same question they were too hurt to ask out loud, whether truth, once spoken, could ever lead back to something whole. Time moved forward without asking either of them if they were ready, and weeks passed in a blur of routines that felt empty but demanding. Sarah woke early every day, made breakfast, braided Lily's hair, and packed her backpack with notes full of encouragement she barely felt herself, forcing smiles that hid the weight pressing on her chest. She returned to work, answered emails, nodded through meetings, and cried quietly in her car before driving home, where the silence waited like a second shadow. Lily asked fewer questions now, sensing something had changed, and that quiet awareness hurt Sarah more than tears would have. Michael, meanwhile, settled into his small apartment in Toronto, the walls bare, the air cold despite the heat running, his life reduced to essentials he could carry without memory attached. He worked longer hours, not because he needed to, but because staying busy kept his thoughts from circling back to the same images, Lily running toward him at the door, Lily asleep on his shoulder during movie nights, Lily calling him dad without hesitation. He told himself distance was necessary, that structure and legal steps would keep him safe, yet emotional safety felt impossible when grief showed up uninvited. Some nights he opened old messages, reread jokes and plans, then closed the app quickly, ashamed of missing a life he believed was built on a lie. Sarah sent messages she knew would not be read, then stopped, understanding that healing could not be forced. She focused on being steady for Lily, attending school events alone, clapping louder than needed, feeling the absence beside her like an empty seat no one else noticed. One rainy afternoon, months after the separation, fate placed Michael and Sarah in the same grocery store aisle, reaching for the same brand of cereal, both freezing when they looked up. The moment was brief but heavy, their eyes meeting, years passing between them in seconds. Sarah wanted to apologize again, to explain the depth of her regret, but words stayed trapped behind her ribs. Michael nodded once, polite, distant, then walked away, his heart racing as if he had run a mile. That night he lay awake, staring at the ceiling, realizing anger had softened into something more painful, uncertainty. He questioned whether love was erased by biology or defined by the daily acts of care he had given freely. Sarah, too, lay awake, holding Lily close, wondering if doing the right thing late was worse than doing nothing at all. Neither of them had moved on, not truly. They were simply surviving separate lives shaped by the same loss, each carrying a quiet longing for what once felt unbreakable, unsure if the space between them was protection or punishment, and unaware that the hardest part of the story was not what had been said, but what still remained unsaid. The final stage of their separation arrived without warning, slipping into their lives like an ordinary appointment marked on a calendar, yet carrying the weight of a permanent goodbye. Sarah dressed carefully that morning, choosing simple clothes, not to impress but to survive the day with dignity, while Lily stayed with a neighbor, unaware of how much was about to change. The courthouse was quiet, clean, and impersonal, its halls echoing with footsteps and low voices that made everything feel official and distant. Michael arrived alone, calm on the surface, carrying a folder that held the final proof that the life he once imagined was no longer his. When they sat across from each other, there were no accusations, no raised voices, only tired eyes and careful words spoken through legal terms that reduced years of love into agreements and signatures. Sarah signed first, her hand steady despite the ache in her chest, accepting responsibility without asking for forgiveness she knew might never come. Michael followed, his pen moving slowly, pausing once as if his body resisted the final mark, then finishing the line with a quiet breath. Outside the building, they stood apart under a gray sky, unsure how to end something that had already ended in so many ways. Sarah finally spoke, telling him she never meant to hurt him, that love and fear had tangled inside her until honesty came too late. Michael listened, then replied gently that love without trust could not stand, but that he would always care about Lily in his own way, even if from a distance. They shared one last look, not of anger, but of understanding shaped by loss, then turned in opposite directions, carrying separate futures built from the same past. Days turned into weeks, and life slowly found a new rhythm. Sarah focused on rebuilding stability, finding strength in routine, choosing truth every day even when it felt lonely. Michael rebuilt his life piece by piece, learning to sit with pain without letting it harden him. Sometimes, late at night, he thought of Lily's laugh and the way she held his hand, and Sarah, in quiet moments, wondered if honesty, even when it shatters, still leaves behind something real. Their story did not end with reunion or bitterness, but with acceptance, the kind that grows slowly after heartbreak, reminding them that some love does not disappear, it simply changes form, living on as a lesson, a memory, and a quiet hope for peace beyond the storm.